I had enough money to buy a beautiful Cessna Citation jet, cash. And since there's so much jealousy in this room tonight that I can feel over this, a few weeks later, I bought another one worth 3 times what that one was. Cash. Act happy over my blessing, folks.
Richard Turner, thanks so much for coming back on to Talk Beliefs from Widnes in the northwest of England, not far from Liverpool. A few weeks ago, I interviewed you about your time in a Pentecostal cult and how it also ran a charity supporting survivors of human trafficking. Now, today, we're going to continue our discussion in a kind of a part 2, where we will look into how Pentecostal churches and others use what is known as the prosperity gospel to convince their flocks that God needs their money. So, how are you doing today, Richard? You've had 1 or 2 bits of good news since our last interview, haven't you?
Oh yeah. I've just been appointed a teacher in a college in Yorkshire, teaching counselling. So that's pretty good news. So that'll run alongside my counselling practice, supporting people who've been in cults. So a lot of big changes for me as I move over to Yorkshire in this really strange and stressful time with the coronavirus as well. So lots of things going on at the moment.
Fantastic news, Richard, and best wishes for your new career. Before we get on to our topic, can you just remind folks about your background and your experiences in the Pentecostal community?
So I spent 3 years involved, all linked in with a charismatic Pentecostal cult like church. Before that, I'd been in churches all my life. I'm originally from a Church of England Anglican background, but moved on from that, got a job working for a charity run by a prosperity teaching Pentecostal cult. In a nutshell, slowly over time, it got more and more controlling as I got more involved in it. They started trying to control my relationships. They manipulated me out of a lot of money. And did me a lot of psychological damage. So that has kind of fueled this passion to start talking about some of these kind of churches. And following that, I did a master's in the psychology of controlling behaviour. I was already a trained counsellor, so then I set up in counselling practice to support people who've been in cult-like groups, and did teacher training as well to teach counselling. So in a nutshell, that's a brief overview of the journey I've been on over the last 5, 6, 7 years or so.
Okay, let's get on to the prosperity gospels. For anyone who doesn't know, what exactly is meant by prosperity gospels, and when did this term first emerge?
It's sometimes called seed faith or the health and prosperity gospel, and it's got a number of terms. I think it originated from the 50s and it became quite well known through like televangelists and things like that. But in a nutshell, what it is this idea that God wants us to be healthy, He wants us to be wealthy, and that our faith is demonstrated through giving money. And as we give money, that unlocks blessings in our life. The core of it, in my opinion, you hear lots of different ideas and definitions about what it is, but in my opinion, the idea is that God will bless you if you give money, and you'll have this prosperous life. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell, really, for me.
Well, you, of course, experienced being pressurized to give money to the church during your years in a Pentecostal cult. Take us through how the church and others like it manipulate people over time in order to get them to give up all that they have. What is the process?
Obviously, we're using the term church here, but not every church is trying to manipulate people out of money. We're not saying that every Pentecostal church is doing this. We're talking specifically about prosperity teaching, like seed faith churches here, which are bordering on becoming like cults or are cults. But we've got a number of things going on. We've got the general culture of the group, and the coercion and the control and going on in the wider group. But then we've got what's going on specifically in the services. So I think like we've already got this set up, this repetition that there were these people who are prophets and the leaders, and in my group, they're talked about as if they're wise and they're leading everyone in this movement that's going to make a big difference, and they were drilling it into the congregation over and over again. We're going to make a difference in the city. This is going to change the city. This is going to change things. And over time, you build up this like belief that you're part of something that really matters. So before even money is mentioned, you've been in this community where you think this really matters. We're going to make a difference. And of course, the backdrop to the teachings about money and finances feed into that. So you already think, oh, this is important, this matters, and they play on our natural decency to want to make a difference in our communities and to change things. So before they're even talking about money, you're involved in a community where you think what they're doing matters. Unfortunately, sometimes, and I know from the group I was in, lots of it isn't. You never get there, and lots of it isn't true. So you think they're making a difference in the community, but when you logically unpack what they're doing, you realise they're not doing anything. They're not helping anybody. And you think that we're going towards this goal where they're going to make a difference, but they're not doing anything different. They're just meeting every week or having these midweek meetings that don't impact anybody or change anything. So I thought, like, today it might be good to talk about specifically what's going on in the church services when you meet. Now, a lot of these kind of churches have you have a traditional sermon slot, and you have these in Church of England and Methodist churches where the vicar or pastor gets up and gives like a short talk about the Bible and Scripture. But these these churches also, these kind of like prosperity teaching churches, have another talk within the service, which before I attended the one I was involved in, I'd never seen before. So they take an offering every week, and they will deliver another talk specifically about money. Now, what people don't realise is that often this is never public. You won't see this on their YouTube videos or anything like that, because they don't really want people knowing that they're doing that. And you would only know they were doing that by attending. So they'll give these little talks, and you get lots of different themes coming up in these talks. Every avenue that they can go down with in terms of scripture and manipulation to try and get you to give money, they'll go down. So before that talk happens, usually what happens is you've got a block of worship music. It goes on for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and you've been singing in this loud environment with lights, in my group, smoke machines. It's like being at a concert. Emotions are high, you feel amazing, you feel excited, and it really is it almost gets you into this high emotional state. So after that is then when they start asking you for the money. Now every part in this seems to be, from what I've observed, set up to make sure that you give as much as you can give. So someone will come on and do a talk. Now at this point, there's people along the ends of the rows with buckets ready to take all your money. So there's a pressure that involves that comes from the bucket being passed in front of you, and you seeing everybody else putting money in, and everyone seeing you decide not to. So there's a pressure there, thinking, oh, I better put money in because everybody's watching me. So they do these talks. Now there's lots of different things that often come up in these talks. I've been in this type. I was in this type of church for 3 years. My master's dissertation involved analysing these kind of teachings. And every now and again, I'm checking in with these churches on their online streaming to see what kind of things that they're saying, because they do still sometimes leave it in the online streaming service. The church services that they're streaming online. So what I've done is I've written like a list of some of the themes and tactics that they use in these miniature sermon slots about money. So just to go through some of them, you get these this thing of this money comes from God. The money you own comes from God. It doesn't even belong to you. It's God's money. So you need to give it back to God. but the problem is within that is the church is God in that. They make them, you give it back to God by giving it to the church. And so there's a sense of guilt. If you don't give, you've stolen from God. That's God's money, not yours. And you've stolen from God. So that's one theme that comes up. There's often guilt involved and fear. So playing on like negative emotions to make you more compliant. So the other thing is, you're part of the church, you're part of the community, and when you give, you're investing in the community that you're involved in, and that then like brings you into their protection, if you like. So if you don't give, you're not protected by the community spiritually. So I've heard pastors say, I mean, as blunt as I'm saying it now, Satan is going to come after your kids if you're not part of your community, and you're not part of it if you're not tithing, and he'll come after your family. And I've heard it as blunt, and that was in a mainstream, very well known.
It sounds like either an insurance scam or like a mafia boss saying it would be a shame if something were to happen to your kids.
Yeah, and it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but that particular quote I just gave you was from a transcript that I transcribed. And the pastor literally says, "And you've got Satan who's going to come after your kids." As blunt as that. You've also got this other thing of you're contributing towards something. So, like I said earlier, you think you're involved in something that's making a difference in the world, and everything. It's all so exciting. You think, oh well, yeah, I will give money because this group here changes people's lives, so I will give it. Given as an act of faith as well. So what they do is they talk about faith and sacrifice and how you trust in God. But what that implies is if you don't give, you've got no faith. There's something wrong with you if you don't give. This is all about faith and like how that is then pleasing God. It pleases God when you have faith. So when you're giving money, you're pleasing God. But if you don't give money, you've got no faith, and therefore you don't please God. So it's just black and white. You're either in or you're out. Narrowing of the options. You can only be in it, give the money, be accepted. It's like conditional love. God's love is conditional based on your giving money. So you're either in or you're out. This black and white. There's no middle ground. There's no grey area. Like that. Then that's how it kind of operates. And that then, if you don't, there's the guilt, there's the shame, and I've heard. I was listening to one recently, and this wasn't actually even in one of these big mega churches. This was actually from an Anglican church. I heard someone say, "If you don't want to give us money, don't give us money, because it's about your heart, and God wants us to have soft hearts." And I was thinking, so basically, you're hard-hearted if you don't give us money. And it sounds like, oh, giving is this great thing, but you're still left with these two options. You either do it and you're good and you're soft-hearted and you care, or you don't and you're hard-hearted and you're not accepted. And
it's what they're not saying, isn't it? It's what they're not saying, and what they hope that how you will respond inside to what they are saying.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's another message underneath what they're saying. And another thing is as well, this is often done by really friendly people. And some of the people delivering these kind of messages, they're not the main senior pastors. They're just like, and they're just normal, nice people who are being manipulated as well within the congregation. And they actually believe it because that's what they've been taught. And the friendliness is part of that as well. You think, oh, this has been delivered by such a friendly person that you don't ever think, what's really going on here, because they're quite charismatic as well in some ways. So, and the leaders know that as well. So they'll choose people who've got this really friendly approach. So the other thing that they do as well is this thing where they'll take a Bible scripture about giving to the poor. And they'll talk about it, and it's good to give to the poor and people in need. And then they switch it. They switch the subject, and then it becomes about giving to the church. So they'll talk about it. So you're thinking, oh yeah, it is really good to be giving the poor. I should be giving me money away. And I've listened to this. I've noticed this a few times. They'll change the subject and the theme as they're talking, and the end point of the discussion isn't about giving to the poor. It's about giving to the church. It's not. But the thinking behind it, in like historically, is that churches are helping people in need, but these ones aren't. They're not helping people in need. There's usually a pastor at the top on a very high wage, and it's like a pyramid scheme where the people at the top are making all the money, and the people at the bottom who are desperate, you know, they want to see this breakthrough in their life and things change. Are giving money, and they're being exploited, which leads me on to my next point quite quite well actually. This idea of it's some kind of investment. You hear a lot of same language as you do in multi-level marketing companies, that this is an investment and it's an opportunity, and you're investing in the kingdom of God, and God is going to bless you, and you're going to get all back and even more. You're going to get more back from God. So when you give to the church, it's all going to come back to you. Now, this is quite an interesting one, because this happened to me, and I know this happened to somebody else who was involved in the same group I was involved in, where you give more money than you're supposed to. So there's one point I gave like a third of my wages away, and I was supposed to be going away with my dad somewhere, and I gave all the money away that was to pay for that trip, and he had to bail me out. And I've heard this happens with other people as well, where a family member will bail someone out because they've given too much. Because these churches, they're encouraging reckless giving. So traditionally it was like 10%, but they'll encourage, and even that is a lot of money, but 10% of your wages. But they encourage even more on top of that. They encourage to the point where I've heard it where someone speaking has been saying, "Oh, you may not have enough money to get through to the end of the week, but you know, you just have to have that base." So they're basically saying, like, even the money you need to get by, you should be giving to us. And they encourage this like culture of recklessness with finances, giving the money you need to buy food, giving like the rest of your bank account, emptying your bank account all in one go. So remember, this is still after 45 minutes of singing and everything's amazing. With this idea that God's going to bless you with some kind of breakthrough in your life. You know, you're gonna get some kind of reward for your faithfulness, for trusting Him, giving until you've got nothing, trusting God that He was going to provide everything for you. But what really happens is people just end up with nothing. Someone then bails them out. But this is a thing that they do as well. So you'll get these pastors, they'll get people on stage, and they'll say, share this amazing story that how you gave us money and then God provided the money for you. And they'll share the story like God provided it for them, but it's their family bailing them out, because the families will do that. If you're struggling and you're in need, families will bail people out more often than not. It's quite not every family is the same, but more often than not, someone will bail them out, and then they'll use that as a testimony of how God provided. But there are these. They get them on stage to prove, to prove that this works. The other thing they do is they teach that salvation is tied in to financial giving. So there are these people out there who are suffering and they need God in their life, and by investing your money, their salvation is reliant on your giving money. So what a horrendous burden! And where does that stop exactly? Like, you know what I mean? There's no cap on it. Like they'll take and take and take from you until you are absolutely bankrupt and you've got nothing. And the guilt and the burden that puts people under, thinking there are people outside in this world who are either going to hell or they're suffering, and they need God. And if I don't give money, that's my fault. So you get again more of this shame, more of this like guilt tripping. And I've said, I'm just looking at my notes again here. I said about people on stage sharing things. Also, you get as well. So and this comes back to the multi-level marketing thing as well, because they do a similar thing. They have like levels. So in multi-level marketing companies, you might get this like, oh, I'm a diamond seller, I'm a gold seller, and they name the levels. A lot of the Pentecostal, prosperity churches have the same thing for givers. So I did a bit of research before this video, and I found one, and this is a major mega church network that's international, and they have faithful believers, vision impactors, and kingdom builders. And the more money you get, the higher up the level you go as a giver. So they're using a lot of the same psychological techniques to manipulate people out of money. And I know that the pastor, the leader of the group I was in, talked about it in his book. He said, name the levels of giving to push people higher up the level to give more money. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is that you often don't know how it's been spent. And because, I mean, like a lot of cults, and I know this has come up in a lot of cult interviews and stuff, there's no like critical, you're not allowed to criticize things, and you're not encouraged to challenge things and ask questions, and you're often, well, in my group, you're often met with like a stony silence, this kind of like, you can't question them, don't question the leaders, don't question the prophets and all that stuff. But no one is saying where this money has been spent. Now, I did a bit of research on the group I was in, and I've looked around, because obviously you can look on the Charity Commission website at, financial reports and things like that. And, there was someone in the group I was involved in, a person being paid £100,000 a year. Now, they're taking offerings and stuff for like £250,000 over the course of a year. And like 100 grand of that is going straight into one person's pocket. And that's suspicious. And again, alongside that, you've got all the expenses. So you look on the Instagram accounts of some of these pastors that are traveling all over the world. And there was one I looked at. He'd been to 8 countries in 6 months, because they live this celebrity lifestyle where they're in demand and they have to go and speak at all these conferences. I looked around at these pastors and their Instagram accounts and things like that. They're traveling all over the world. There's pictures of them by the pool, in all these amazing cities. And the real disturbing thing for me about this prosperity teaching is the people giving the money often haven't got it to give. Or they're giving far more than is sensible to give away to what they might perceive to be a good cause, and they're being exploited. Because another thing about this is this idea is, and this is where it really gets quite disturbing, is there's this teaching within seed faith and prosperity teaching that if you give to get a breakthrough. So my group will often talk about, we're going to have a breakthrough. You're going to give to get this breakthrough. And that involves healing, financial breakthrough, career breakthrough, relationship breakthrough, whatever you want. God is going to give it to you if you give. That gets really disturbing when you hear stories about people who've got cancer and they're giving away the life savings to some of these places because they think that they're going to get the healing. And that is a story. That's a real story, an example that I heard watching like different news reports and things. And that's where it really gets really disturbing for me, where people are so, because it plays on people's, desperation for things to change in their life. And these pastors, they will use any technique and they'll play on what you think is important, what you really need in your life at the moment to get you to give the money. So that
you can understand people doing that if they do have cancer or something like that. But if they just are giving because they think they're going to get an enormous amount of money back, that's not really giving, is it?
Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing, really. It's a strange thing. I don't really know what's going on in other people's minds during that time. But I know for me, I got to a place psychologically where I didn't even analyze it anymore. It was just like, I'll give away £300 and not even bat an eyelid, because they get you to that place where they got me to that place, should I say, where it was a recklessness about me where I stopped analyzing it. And I was just like, well, God will provide it. I can give it all away because it'll all just come back to me. And there was this kind of thing in me of, it's funny because I think back and I'm thinking back to a specific time where I give money and there's nothing going on in my mind as I'm filling in the form. Nothing. There's just almost emptiness. And that's the place it got me into. It was almost like you stop questioning it. But that's just led me on that to another important point, I think, as well, that they will use the principle of social proof. So they will say, well, my group used to publish leaflets, and it would say different people and the names of different people and how much they were giving. So this person was given £10,000, this person given £6,000, and so you think it's normal to give huge amounts, to give loads of money. It becomes normal because you think everyone else is doing it as well. And that was another persuasive technique that they used. But so they were having weekly offerings, then they were having 2 big offerings for a year, where they'd be advertising a month in advance saying, oh, we've got this offering coming up, it's going to be great, you've got to make sure you're going to be there for that Sunday. But that Sunday was no different than any other Sunday, other than they were going to take more money. And they would advertise it like it's a big event. They'd produce promotional material like leaflets, videos which would be played every week leading into it in the church, loud music as well. Again, every technique that they get you, they use like the voice of Winston Churchill on the videos, like people landing on the moon, this idea of this, everything, like to get you to think that this is world changing. And over time, it warped your mind because you think this is going to change the world. But when you come out, you think they were literally, virtually doing nothing for anybody. And I know that I've mentioned from my group they had a separate charity, but most of the people who worked on the ground in the charity weren't involved in the group. It was just run by the cult, and it basically gave them a good reputation. But you think you're part of this world-changing movement, and you get out and you think they just weren't really doing much to help anybody, really. Yeah, I mean that's kind of in a nutshell the kind of things that would be talked about and said in those kind of teachings leading up to the offering. I think that's kind of an overview, if you like. There's so much more going on, and as I've said, it's not necessarily just about what they're teaching about money. It's everything around it. It's the whole community. It's the manipulation from the leader. It's all that stuff as well going on in the background. Yeah.
Richard, what about people who leave these kind of communities? I'm assuming that if they have given all their money and perhaps possessions to the church, they're going to find it pretty difficult subsisting out in the world, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean there are practical implications of all this. I've heard some quite horrible stories. To be honest, I've heard a couple of people say that they were remortgaging the house and giving money to the church, and when they left, they had nothing and they lost the homes. I've heard stories of people having mental health problems because of this fear that Satan was going to come after them because they weren't giving money. I mean, I've heard of church, some of these prosperity churches teaching that demons are going to get in you if you don't give us money. And for people, there are people involved in those communities who are struggling with their mental health already, and then someone's feeding that, feeding them that stuff. When they leave, that can be very traumatic. I've heard of relationships breaking down, and I've just remembered another thing. On this subject is there are scriptures about in the Bible about not bragging about your giving it in secret, and some of these churches will use that to stop discussion and critical thought about giving money. So, oh yeah, you should give in secret, which is bizarre considering they have people on stage telling people how much they're giving. But what that can cause is the problems in relationships where one partner is giving lots of money and they don't tell their other partner, and that can cause a real problem for relationships if they've been encouraged not to discuss their giving with the husband, wife, partner, whatever. And people, I know people have given all the savings away. The biggest amount I heard is someone give £50,000 one time, and this is money people have been saving for years. And they can, people can lose their homes, you lose all the savings. It damages the relationship because of this recklessness in giving money, and also the fears and the shame can have a negative impact on people's mental health. For me personally, I wasn't even in it for very long, and I think, wow. Imagine people have been in this for years, what they're struggling with now. But when I left, I still had this idea, this recklessness with money, this thing of it'll just fall out of the sky. And even though I wasn't in it anymore, I still had this kind of strange belief that the money was going to come from nowhere, like it was just going to appear. And that was quite difficult to keep to process and work, and work through and get to this point where it's like, I'll have to work for all my money. It won't just drop out the sky. A miracle isn't going to happen. I'm not going to win the lottery, etc., etc. That was a big struggle for me when I left personally. That recklessness, and obviously, when I was in it, I had an overdraft in my bank account, and rather than pay off my overdraft, I was giving the church money. So with all the other psychological damage that was done to me being in it, I also had that issue. So when I left, I wasn't well enough to work, but I had to be paid off my overdraft. So I had the added pressure of the bank saying, you've got no money coming into your account, you need to be paying off your overdraft. But I wasn't well enough to work. So, I mean, I consider myself to be quite fortunate because my overdraft wasn't a huge amount of money. But for other people, if they're in big debt, and I have heard people being encouraged to take out credit cards and all sorts of things to give the churches money, that could be real serious. I was quite fortunate. I managed to work through it, and but yeah, so there's psychological impact and there's practical impact and there's impact on relationships as well. Yeah.
Okay, Richard, that was really informative. Thanks so much for coming back onto Talk Beliefs to give us your unique insights. I hope you'll get through this current lockdown situation, and soon you'll be able to get back to your counseling work.
Thanks very much. Yeah.